You think this is the 48th president? Do you think JD Vance is going to win president? I think one thing that would make me confident about him is the fact that it seems like the more that he talks, the more people like him. Where it's like for other people, it's like the less they talk, the more people like them.
Pete Hegseth, it was a tie, bipartisan opposition, smallest margin since the job was created. You had to break that tie. If the nominee can't unite your party, how's he going to lead 3 million people?
Well, look, I think Pete is a disruptor, and a lot of people don't like that disruption. But, Margaret, that disruption is incredibly necessary. If you think about all of those bipartisan massive votes, we have to ask ourselves, what did they get us? They got us a country where we fought many wars over the last 40 years but haven't won a war about as long as I've been alive. They've got us a military with a major recruitment crisis, a procurement price crisis that's totally dysfunctional, where we buy airplanes for billions and billions of dollars, terrible cost overruns, the delivery dates are always delayed. So
I do think that he's right, where like if you make the appeal to authority that like, wow, a lot of senators and people don't want to have this guy to be like in charge of the Secretary of Defense. Well, yeah, because they might be involved in, you know, like it might be in their best interest to just have continual wars forever.
We need a big change. Now, admittedly, there are people who don't like that big change, but it is necessary, and it's explicitly what Donald J. Trump ran on. And I think part of the reason why the American people elected him their 47th president.
So the main objective is changing all of that, that it's going to be Pete Hegseth alone?
I'd say the main problem the main thing that we want Pete Hegseth to do is to fix the problems at the Department of Defense. And unfortunately, there are many. We've gotten into way too many wars that we don't have a plan for winning. We've gotten into way too many misadventures that we shouldn't have got into in the very first place. And our procurement process, Margaret, is incredible.
I think this is the way that I would say 80 to 90% of people feel about the military, is that they respect the military and they support it, but they think that we spend too much money on it and we involve ourselves in things that aren't important. I think that this actually represents like the vast majority of the population. The Colombian president tweet. I'll look at that after this. He's completely right. And I think this is also, if anything, this is more a Democrat talking point than a Republican one.
Decisions.
Well, of course, they're policy decisions, but they're also logistical and implementation decisions. If you look at where we are with the rise of artificial intelligence, with the rise of drone technology and drone warfare, we have to really, top to bottom, change the way that we fund the procurement of weapons, the way that we arm our troops. This is a major...
The thing is that you have to keep in mind, like, JD Vance and, like, everybody that's, like, around his age and, like, our age, too. Like, he's 40, I'm 34. Like, this was such a problem for all of us growing up that it made one of the most popular video game series of all time, Metal Gear Solid. Like, make no mistake, Metal Gear Solid is absolutely politically based off of the military-industrial complex, and that is the prime focus. That is what it is built off of. And it was so popular because the message was so good.
Period of disruption, and we think Pete Hegseth is the guy to lead the job. Now, there's another element to this, Margaret, too, which is we believe that military morale, at least until the election of President Trump, was historically low. You had the Army missing recruitment goals by tens of thousands of soldiers, and already recruitment is starting to pick up because Pete Hegseth is fundamentally a warfighter's leader at the Department of Defense. He is a guy who sees not through the perspective of the generals or the bureaucrats. He looks at things through the perspective of the men and women that we send off to fight in our wars.
I think it's also like it's a motivational thing. Like, I heard that there were a lot of people that wanted to sign up for like Border Patrol, and they were like more willing to sign up for like the military now because they believe in the goals of the military. And this is exactly what happened after September 11th, is that a lot of people signed up to the military like crazy. Like, everybody it was like Helldivers 2. Like, for anybody who was alive back after 9/11 happened and like old enough to like kind of pick up on it, like the country basically turned into Super Earth for like 5 years, if not longer. And so, yeah, I was in high school. Well, I was in middle school at the time, and it totally shifted everything, right? That post 9/11 patriotism, exactly. And I think that really the reason why people probably stopped wanting to enlist into the military is that nobody wants to fight a proxy war for oil. Nobody wants to, be a pawn in some, oligarch dispute in Syria. Why would somebody want to do that? There's no, like, I mean, it's easy to see why a guy would sign up to fight Hitler. Fuck yeah, absolutely. But with something like this, no. Just like what Armstrong said, as I said, man, the series, that wasn't Armstrong, that was Sundowner. And he said, just like the good old days after 9/11. I remember that so well. And he's right. That's why that game was so good.
Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard.
And by the way, just to go even farther, look at Sundowner, look at Dick Cheney. Come on.
Conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard. The Review called her an atrocious nominee who deserves to be defeated. They compared her defense of Edward Snowden, the fugitive who stole U.S. secrets, to an attorney general who thinks the mob gets a bad rap. Her refusal to accept U.S. intelligence findings.
Thinking the mob gets a bad rap? So is quite simply a traitor and a fugitive from U.S. justice? Yeah, that's the problem.
That Assad gassed his own people, they said, was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count.
I think this is a fair criticism, and I know a couple of people who have family in Syria, and they showed me some of the photos and some of the things that Assad did, and it was actually shocking to me that when all of that happened, I didn't hear about it almost at all in American media. Gassing his own people? He was literally, like, that dude, apparently, it was like Bane in fucking, like, Batman. There were, like, women who were imprisoned who got pregnant because they probably got raped by the guards or other prisoners there, and they had kids that were born into the prisons. Straight up. He's terrible. Yeah. Fake news? Well, hey, not according to people that I know. I could be wrong. Hey. But these are people that I talked to directly. They told me this personally.
Any of this give you pause putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community? Yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively, but those publications don't determine who the president is, the American people do.
Him.
And Donald J. Trump is the person who determines who his cabinet is, not these publications that I think, frankly, have lost relevance.
The Senate will.
They have. And I think also the issue of like media trying to pretend to be the fourth branch of government is extremely dangerous. I don't like it at all.
Tulsi Gabbard's
decide.
Well, the Senate will provide advice and consent, as is its constitutional obligation, but I feel confident that Tulsi Gabbard will ultimately get through. Two things that are important to know about Tulsi. First of all, she is a career military servant who's had a classification at the highest levels for nearly 2 decades. She has impeccable character, impeccable record of service, and she also is a person who I think is going to bring some trust back to the intelligence services. The bureaucrats...
She was the one that shut down Kamala Harris. In like this debate, Kamala Harris was doing some bullshit, and then Tulsi Gabbard called her out for putting people in jail for smoking weed, and then talking about how she was smoking weed on a podcast. And that was the end of Kamala Harris. It took her, I think she had like 2 or 3%, and it took that 2 or 3% down to 0. Huge.
At our intelligence services have gotten completely out of control. They've been part of the weaponization of our political system, the weaponization of our justice system. We need to have good intelligence services who keep us safe, but part of that is restoring trust in those services, and we think Tulsi is the right person to do it. That's why the president... She doesn't
trust those intelligence services.
She recognizes that the bureaucrats have gotten out of control, and we need somebody there who's going to rein them in and return those services to their core mission of identifying information that's going to keep us safe.
You campaigned on lowering prices for consumers. We've seen all of these executive orders. Which one lowers prices?
We have done a lot, and there have been a number of executive orders that have caused...
It's been 5 days, right? 6 days. Like, I mean, it's going to be kind of hard to fix that in a few days.
Already jobs to start coming back into our country, which is a core part of lowering prices. more capital investment, more job creation in our economy is one of the things that's going to drive down prices for all consumers, but also raise wages so that people can afford to buy the things that they need. If you look at our slate of executive orders, no, Margaret, prices are going to come down, but it's going to take a little bit of time, right? The president has been president for all of 5 days. I think that in those 5 days, he's accomplished more than Joe Biden did in 4 years. It's been an incredible breakneck pace of activity. We're going to work with Congress. We're, of course, going to have more executive orders, and we're going to try the way that you lower prices is that you encourage more capital investment into our country. And you ask specifically, what executive order is going to help lower prices? All of the stuff that we've done on energy to explore more energy reserves. To
One thing I always really respect and appreciate with JD Vance is that he answers the question. Like, there's a lot of times like people will like not answer the question, but he is directly answering this question.
Develop more energy resources in the United States of America. One of the main drivers of increased prices under the Biden administration is that we had a massive increase in energy prices. Donald Trump has already taken multiple executive actions that are going to lower energy prices, and I do believe that means consumers are going to see lower prices at the pump and at the grocery store, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and while we've done a whole lot, we can't undo all of the damage of Joe Biden's presidency in 4 days.
Well, there are a lot of things that contributed to higher energy prices, and there was record oil and gas production.
Yes, Joe Biden did many terrible things to lead to an increase in prices. I agree, Margaret.
No, but all the things you experience at the grocery store are what people touch and feel. That's what you were talking about, bacon on the campaign trail.
Of course, of course.
Those things, when do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives?
Well, Margaret, how does bacon get to the grocery store? It comes on trucks that are fueled by diesel fuel. If the diesel's way too expensive, the bacon's going to become more expensive. How do we grow the bacon? Our farmers need energy to produce it. So if we lower energy prices, we are going to see lower prices for consumers, and that is what we're trying.
It's crazy how such a smug, stupid question like that is immediately dismantled by anybody who even slightly knows what they're talking about. Like, I see this all the time on Twitter. Thank God. It's common sense. Yeah, it is. It's common fucking sense.
Trying to fight for.
Well, the flurry of executive orders, most of them weren't about the economy. Many of them.
You're going to grow bacon?
Yeah. We had, I think we've taken
promise
over.
Of tariffs by February 1st.
We've taken over 200 executive actions, some executive orders, other executive actions. Again, this is in less than a week, and a lot of them were focused on the economy, bringing investment into our country and lowering energy prices.
Absolutely.
We've also focused on safety, restoring public safety, ending weaponization of the Department of Justice. We've done a lot. And I think the president is to be commended for actually coming in and doing something with this incredible mandate the American people gave him. He's not sitting in the Oval Office doing nothing. He's doing the American people's business.
Are people unhappy because you said grow pigs? Is this really something that people are fixating on? About growing pigs? Because I see a lot of comments in the chat. It's a funny way of saying it. But yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. That's pretty much what happens. Can I have some oats, brother? Why are they feeding him the oats?
I think they're going to see a lot of good effects from it.
Well, a lot of these announcements have yet to take effect.
Sure.
The president did say he wants to do something with an executive order in relation to federal emergency response. He said he may reform or eliminate FEMA. Instead of sending emergency responders, he may start to send a percentage of money to states to take care of themselves. But, FEMA has specialized expertise that some of these states just don't have in their arsenal. And
I wish
how
that they...
will states who are lower income states, the Mississippis, the Kentuckys, the Alabamas, be able to do this for themselves without federal help?
Well, the president, to be clear, is not saying we're going to leave anybody behind. He's saying that in the way that we administer these resources, some of which is coming from the federal level, some of which is coming from the state level, we've got to get the bureaucrats out of the way and get the aid.
This isn't anything new. I mean, like anybody remembers, there's a reason why Kanye West said George Bush doesn't care about black people. This has been a problem forever. Yeah, I mean, this is Hurricane Katrina. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that what was so crazy is I remember I watched Kanye say that, and I feel like everybody was like, yeah, right? That's the thing. Everybody was like, yeah, kind of, right? No, this has been something that's been going on for a long time. It's been bad.
People who need it most.
But these are the first
unhinged take. Yeah.
You talk about the expertise from FEMA. FEMA in North Carolina, in California, in Florida with some of the hurricanes has often been a disaster. And it's not because we don't have good people at FEMA, it's because bureaucratic red tape and garbage prevents the rapid deployment of resources to the people who need it most.
But the states are now going to have to do this themselves?
The president is trying to encourage us to reform the way that we deliver emergency response in a way that gets resources to the people who need it.
So don't take him literally, is what you're saying.
We should take the
Man, how do you... It's so embarrassing. It really is. This is so fucking embarrassing. It's so obviously in bad faith. It is. It's not even like, I mean, this is the reason why people don't trust the media. It's like, at least whenever you go to the Young Turks or you tune into InfoWars or something like that, you know that they've got an agenda. But the difference here is that these people present themselves as being, oh, well, we're just reporting the news. But it's so obvious that there's a clear bias here. It is. It's so obvious.
President at his word that FEMA needs desperate reform because it does. Margaret, when I went to North Carolina as VP-elect, but before we were sworn in, people would talk about how FEMA would get resources, food, medicine, water to a warehouse, but then would have no plan to get it from the warehouse to the people in the mountains who were literally starving and thirsting to death. We can do so much better, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we will.
But they work with the state and local officials.
They often don't work well enough. And again, that's not because
on the state and local officials?
No, the FEMA management officials don't work well enough with the state and local officials to get resources to the people who need it. We should expect, and this is, I think, one of the fundamental premises of President Trump's leadership, the American people should expect more of their government. When there's a terrible disaster, they should expect food, medicine, and water to get to the people who need it. When there's a terrible fire in California, the fire hydrants ought to actually turn on. I am sick of the American people having such low expectations for their government. They should demand more of us because it's the
I think that's one of the big surprises that people have, because like apparently like Trump mobilized the military to like help repair some things. And a lot of people were like, wait, you can do that? Like a bunch of engineers from the military, like, oh, you can even do that? Like, I think that people have been conditioned to completely accept like lower and lower expectations all the time. And I think it's embarrassing, especially for how much taxes we pay. We pay a lot of money in taxes. Why are there potholes in the roads all the time? Why are they not able to sort this out? Really, it's what are we doing?
This country in the world, and that's what Donald Trump's leadership promises to bring back.
So still count on the federal government, but watch that space. Let me ask you about another area that you campaigned on quite a lot, and there was a flurry of activity on, and that has to do with immigration.
Sure.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement.
Wow, so a bunch of religious people said not to do something.
To enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have
I think that if the Catholic Association feels this strongly about it, that we should ship all of those people over to the Vatican. That's what I think. I think we should ship all of them over there, and then they can deal with it, and they can actually, that's their problem.
Person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to
Well,
actually...
they're full of shit. They literally live in a walled city. It's not even a question. It shouldn't even be taken seriously for a second. Like, you're going to let people lecture you about open borders who live in a walled city? Are you kidding me?
Look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they
back
worried
the Nazis? I don't think that that's true. I know that Hitler met with the Pope, but I don't think that it's fair to say that they met with Nazis. Now, Ratzinger, the previous Pope, was part of Hitler Youth, I think, but it's whenever he was underage, and so I wouldn't blame that on him either.
about humanitarian
Very
concerns?
true. I could be wrong.
Or are they actually
I just don't
worried
know that.
about their bottom line?
And I don't think that's true, but I'm not sure.
Immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump promised to do that, and I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open border of Joe Biden.
You personally
let them talk
support them
about
going into
people like
schools
Laken
and
Riley
churches.
who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or anybody else, in a way that keeps us safe. Let me ask this question, Margaret. Let's separate the immigration issue. If you had a violent murderer in a school, of course I want law enforcement to go and get that person out.
Of course.
So what's the point of the question?
You changed the regulation this week. That's the point of the question.
Exactly.
Because the regulation wasn't working. Because if it was, you wouldn't have been in the problem to begin with. What do you mean you changed the regulation? How is it even a question? Like, yet obviously.
The authority to go into churches and go into schools.
We empowered law enforcement to enforce
but
the
that
law
also
everywhere
has
to protect Americans.
Effect, a chilling effect, arguably, to people to not send their kids to school.
I desperately hope
you don't want to send your kids to school because there might be law enforcement at the school. Well, here in America, I wish there was more law enforcement at the school. At Uvalde, I think that would have helped. But unfortunately, they were pussyfooting around outside and people got killed. So I don't really see this as I don't really, what is this? It defies logic. Yeah, there's no thinking to this at all.
I hope it has a chilling effect on
churches,
illegal immigrants coming into our country.
You think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals from?
I think the
Let me hear that again.
Conference of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals?
Man.
I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for.
No.
And I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better.
There are 5 legal challenges already to one of the other immigration.
Keep in mind that, like, the only person in the Catholic faith who is any sort of orator to God is the Pope himself. So any sort of bishops getting together to have an opinion about something, this is not the word of God. This is not any sort of like unique, unquestionable doctrine. The only person who has the authority to, advocate for God on God's behalf is the Pope himself. Now, I could be a little bit off base on this, but that's what I remember.
Actions, the order on birthright citizenship. A federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan, I think you'd agree, has some conservative credentials, paused the order to end birthright citizenship, calling it blatantly unconstitutional. How do you reconcile this challenge to the 14th Amendment to the Constitution?
So I obviously disagree with that judge, and these things, some of them will be litigated. That's the nature of our constitutional system. But here's the basic idea of President Trump's view on this. If you are a lawful permanent resident or a legal immigrant who plans to stay, your children, of course, should become American citizens. But let's say you're the child of an ambassador. You don't become.
But that's not part of it.
Well, that
There's
is
already a
that is
carve-out
that is
having
an
to do with
important
kids of
principle.
diplomats.
But we're saying that that carve-out should apply to anybody who doesn't plan to stay here. If you come here on vacation and you have a baby in an American hospital, that baby doesn't become an American citizen. If you're an illegal...
It does sound illogical. It does. It sounds ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I don't... like, how do people not see it this way? It's crazy. It's a good point, yeah.
And you come here temporarily.
You don't hate the media enough? Well, this is the reason why a lot of people are so critical of the media. This is exactly the reason. Absolutely. People are tired of this shit. Why do they carry water for the illegals? I don't know. And I think that, like, for a long time, they had, like, the emotional upper hand with it. And I think that a lot of the types of messaging that these people use is primarily emotional messaging. And I think that when you look at it more logically, it becomes a little bit sillier. And it's optics. Yeah, it's optics and emotions. And I think that really they've kind of lost that battle nowadays because there's just been so many instances of, you know, some illegal immigrant that's been arrested 17 times that's still in the country. Like, you tell that to an average Walmart American, and they're going to be like, why the fuck did this happen? Because you think also about this, it's like if they've been arrested 17 times, that means that there are 17 instances of government funding going into micromanaging this person that shouldn't even be here in the first place. Collectively, that's probably over $100,000. So that's $100,000 minimum, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, realistically, that have been spent on micromanaging this person who shouldn't even be here.
Hopefully, your child does not become an American citizen by virtue of just having been born on American soil. It's a very basic principle in American immigration law that if you want to become an American citizen and you've done it the right way, and the American people in their collective wisdom have welcomed you into our national community, then you become a citizen. But temporary residents, people who come in here, whether legally or illegally, and don't plan to stay, their children should become American citizens. I don't know any country that does that or why we would be different.
Well, this is a country.
Of course, right? I think that's the way a lot of people see it. A lot of people think that, like, here we go, not understanding economics when it comes to illegal immigrants. I think that illegal immigrants do contribute to the economy. And they do absolutely, like, they do jobs for, like, really cheap amounts of money. But I don't think that that's a good argument. I think that that's probably a slave. I mean, that's really, like, it's basically a slave argument, right? Where you're saying that, well, because these people are willing to work for below minimum wage and accept conditions that are below average, that now we need to keep them in here because we need this underclass of people to maintain low prices. I find that to be very exploitative and bad. I think it's a moral evil. And so, like, it's not good, I think, in the long term, logically, and I don't think that it's good ethically or morally either. Because also those people, here's another thing, it's bad for them too, because they get taken advantage of. Like, let's say the boss doesn't pay them, or like they don't pay them as much money. Well, what happens? What protections do they have? Nothing. And honestly, like, another big factor with this, and this is something that I really, really feel like they should do, is they need to hold these companies accountable. Because those are the people that are really doing it, right? It's like if you're a company and you're knowingly hiring illegals, like, you need to be paying massive fucking fines for that. No, don't take my servants away. Yeah, exactly. Because those are the people, like, they're the ones that are creating this culture and this ecosystem. Now, like, the government allows it to happen, but these companies are the ones, I mean, I wouldn't say it's human trafficking. I think that's a exaggeration. But they're effectively taking advantage of these people, and, like, they're spawn camping these people that come across the border and putting them in positions that they shouldn't be in. Companies will see no retribution. Well, I unfortunately, I agree with you. I think that you're right that that's the outcome, but that shouldn't be the outcome. What happens when I need my lawn cut? You buy a lawnmower, you cut your fucking lawn. Or you pay somebody who's legal to do it. It's not like every single person that comes by to cut your lawn oh, all the people that cut lawns are illegal Mexicans. What are we talking about? Really? Like, what is this? Wait, no, I know what it is. It's racism. What is this? It's crazy.
Founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded
unique
by...
country.
Yeah.
This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers, but just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world. No.
Fucking obviously. Yeah, the argument of like, well, you know, the country was founded on this, and so now we have to... Yeah, they're like, what? Like, why does that matter? It's like... I think that this like emotional and optical like kind of manipulation, what I really like about this is the focus on pragmatism and logic. And I think people are just fucking exhausted with the optics and the manipulation of this. It's crazy. It doesn't work anymore? Yeah, people are tired of it.
Says that temporary visitors, their children, will be given complete access to the benefits and blessings of American citizenship. America should actually look out for the interests of our citizens first. And that means, again, if you're here permanently and lawfully, your kid becomes an American citizen. If you're not here permanently, if you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and don't plan to be, why would we make those people's children American citizens permanently?
I'm going to be honest. I think he's right. I do. I think he's right. And it always seemed like the thing is, if this was a video game, that would have been patched out. It would have been considered an exploit. Absolutely.
I want to ask you about refugee admissions, which were just suspended by the president. That has nothing to do with the U.S. border. Refugee screening takes 18 to 24 months to go through. They are heavily vetted. Left literally at the airport this week were thousands of Afghans, some of whom had worked with the United States government and were promised to come here. When you talked to us in August, you said, I don't think we should abandon anybody who's been properly
vetted. This is more emotional reasoning. There's no logic to this at all. So we need to help these Afghans. We have homeless veterans. What's the logic here?
Vetted and helped us.
It's the emotional
Do you stand
guilt.
by that?
Yeah.
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals
but there are
have been properly
30,000
vetted.
people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary
Do you stand by
concern
it?
as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And
Yeah, fucking exactly. Fucking exactly. Yeah, your responsibility isn't to Afghans. Like, no, I don't want to have you advocating for refugees from Afghanistan. How is it's amazing that this is even happening. It's shocking. Common sense tastes so good. I know. And it's crazy to see, like, I'm so happy that people are finally pushing back on this total fucking manipulation. It's been exhausting to deal with. Yeah, this journalist is a joke. I mean, yeah, I agree. That's different. The U.S. caused a lot of the conflict in Afghanistan. I don't care. That doesn't matter. That's not the... Yes. So what? It doesn't matter. Yeah, so this means that we have to, like, put people here at risk? That's crazy.
Now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These
It's
people are
not
vetted.
good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
And this is the problem that I think a lot of people have, is that a lot of the people that advocate for this kind of stuff are never victims of their own empathy. And so, like, they never have to deal with the negative consequences of this kind of stuff. And so to them, it's like, this is fine. Oh, this is the right thing to do. It's like the whole idea of like a luxury belief.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
Man. Yep. There you go. Fucking finally. Oh my God. I don't care. Yep. People live in an ivory tower.
2 weeks ago, you were on Fox News and you said if you protested peacefully on January 6th and had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. Did you counsel the president against these blanket pardons for 1,500 people?
Well, Margaret, I noticed,
including those who committed violence.
Margaret, I noticed that you cut off the thing that I said immediately after that. The full quote is that, of course, there are gray areas. And here's the nature of the gray area. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice denied constitutional protections in the prosecutions. There were double standards.
He was ready for this shit, man. Yeah. Man. I feel like, again, am I the only person that I thought JD Vance was a goober, and I was like very down on him, and then when he did that debate, my opinion of this guy 180'd. And like every one of these interviews and like the conversations and everything, this guy is great. You underestimated him? I totally did. I thought he was an idiot, fat couch fucker. And it turns out that no, not really.
Standards and how sentences were applied to the J6 protesters versus other groups. What the president said consistently on the campaign is that he was going to look at a case-by-case basis.
This is blanket.
And that's exactly what we did. We looked at 1,600 cases, and the thing that came out of it, Margaret, is that there was a massive denial of due process of liberty, and a lot of people were denied their constitutional rights. The president believes that. I believe that, and I think he made the right decision.
Daniel Rodriguez used an electroshock.
Somebody did bring up a good point. The couch fucker part is still up for debate. It is, but I agree with him on enough other things that I can forgive that. Listen, young guys do all kinds of weird stuff. It is what it is, right? You know, a sock, microwave banana, sofa. It is what it is.
Weapon against a policeman who was dragged out of the defensive line by plunging it into the officer's
apple
neck.
pie, yeah.
He was imprisoned, sentenced to 12 years, 7 months. He got a pardon. Ronald Maccabee hit a cop while wearing reinforced brass knuckle gloves, and he held one down on the ground as other rioters assailed the officer for over 20 seconds, causing a concussion. If you stand with law enforcement, how can you call these people unjustly imprisoned?
Margaret, you're separating, there's an important issue here. There's what the people actually did on January the 6th, and we're not saying that everybody did everything perfectly. And then what did Merrick Garland's Department of Justice do in unjustly prosecuting well over 1,000 Americans in a way that was politically motivated?
Is violence like that against a police officer ever justified?
Violence against a police officer is not justified, but that doesn't mean that you should have Merrick Garland's weaponized Department of Justice.
I think that Trump and them made a mistake by pardoning a lot of the people that were violent, and I think that they should have been a little bit more conservative with the pardons, and I think that it opened them up to criticism that they didn't need to have. And I feel like they kind of made this decision as like a show of force, but I don't really want to see a show of force over the justice system. I don't think that. I understand that other people don't think that, but I do think it's an unnecessary L, and they don't need to do that. God, you have to be fair. Like, my viewpoint is that if you assault a police officer, you need to be in jail. It's not even a question. They were over-sentenced, though. Well, and I'm not saying that. I think that a lot of them definitely were over-sentenced. But having some of them go free that were violent towards police officers is an unnecessary L. And I think it was a mistake to do it. Now, is it a big deal? It's not really a huge deal. It's probably a handful of people. But it's an unnecessary L, and it didn't have to happen. So, yeah.
expose you to incredibly unfair process, to denial of constitutional rights, and frankly, to a double standard that was not applied to many people, including, of course, the Black Lives Matter rioters who killed over 24 people and never had the weight of a weaponized Department of Justice come against them.
And I think this is the point, right, is that it's done in response, because he's right about this, but two wrongs don't make a right. You see what I'm saying? How many years for hitting a policeman? Minimum 5. I think if you violently assault a police officer, especially with a weapon, you need to be in jail for at least 5 years. That's at least. Police officers are, it's a 2 to, Cody already knows. It's a 2 to 10 year sentence. Yeah. Yeah, we already know. Yeah, 2 to 10 years over here. Hey, yeah, it is what it is. It's been around, yeah.
Pardon power is not just for people who are angels or people who are perfect. And of course, we love our law enforcement and want people to be peaceful with everybody, but especially with our good cops.
Who got 5 years for trespassing?
That's a separate issue from what Merrick Garland's Department of Justice did. We rectified a wrong, and I stand by it.
I'm being told we're out of time, but I want to quickly ask you. The
Please.
richest men in the world were at that Capitol on Inauguration Day. Heads of Amazon, Google, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. In August, you told us Google and Facebook are too big. We ought to take the Teddy Roosevelt approach. Break them up. Don't let them control what people are allowed to say. They've now donated to the Trump inauguration. Are you still going to break up big tech?
So, you know who else was at the inauguration? Was my mom and a lot of people who just supported the president and fought every single day to get his election. And
they
to make
gave $1 million
possible
each to the inauguration.
Well, there were a lot of people who didn't give $1 million to the inauguration.
They got pretty good seating.
Who were on that stage, Margaret. They didn't have as good a seating as my mom and a lot of other people who were there to support us. But look, we believe fundamentally that big tech does have too much power, and there are two ways they can go about this. They can either respect Americans' constitutional rights, they can stop engaging in censorship, and if they don't, you can be absolutely sure that Donald Trump's leadership is not going to look too kindly on them.
So they're still on notice.
They're very much on notice.
For the first time in more than
I feel like that's what makes sense, right? Because, like, there are monopolies, and here's the thing, is that monopolies exist, but they're regulated, and they're basically held accountable by the government. JD did a good job. Yeah, he did. I think that it's disappointing that he has to defend what I consider to be kind of a bad decision with the January 6 hostages, the fucking criminals in a lot of cases, felons in some cases, with them stealing and hitting police officers. I think it's disappointing that he has to defend that decision. I don't think that's a great decision to make. But otherwise, I feel like a lot of the stuff that he said was really fucking accurate. Yeah, it was absolutely accurate. Didn't Google get in trouble recently for monopolization? Dismantled every bad faith argument with ease? Yeah, I mean, he really came prepared. And I think that also, I mean, this has been something that I feel like I'm not the only person with. A lot of people have felt this way, that this guy has totally turned things around in terms of like people's perception of him. Because I think that he, at the beginning, was probably one of the least liked people, especially compared to like Tim Walz. And all he's done after that is like elevate people's opinions of him, right? Obviously, you know, like not everybody's opinions, but like the people that were on the fence, I think that they're kind of on his side. I don't think it was a bad decision. He upheld the Fourth Amendment with this decision. Last administration unconstitutionally prosecuted too many January 6 people. Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand the argument for it, but all I'm saying, I feel like this isn't really a crazy thing, is that they should have been a little bit more conservative with the pardons. Like, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have pardoned anybody. I'm saying that just a little bit more conservative would have been something that I would prefer. That's about it. And so, like, yeah. It's about the context of it. Yeah, I get it. He was heavily unfavored until they sat down and spoke with him. Yeah, I think so. But either way, this interview, I remember seeing it, you know, a couple of clips and like things about it, and like also interviews with this guy before. And I really do think that like a lot of his viewpoints are things that average people think. And I think that he does represent like a huge amount of people, especially with like the position of like, it doesn't really matter where like, the justification for like whether somebody's vetted or not. If you have these people coming in and it's at a danger to other people that are here, then, you're the president of the United States, not the world, right? And so, yeah, makes sense comment again. Yeah, exactly. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for.